I'm Mary Fairhurst. I'm one of the justices on the Washington Supreme Court. Every day we hear of misunderstandings or misperceptions about how the court system works. They just aren't true. Whether in the community, on the internet, or in the media, these mistaken beliefs undermine the trust and confidence the public should have in our court system. Today we would like to address some of these common myths about how the court works.
I believe that the judges do work for the police.
Judges do not work for the police or a law enforcement agency. There are no legal family ties, and my job as a judge is to make sure that everyone is treated fairly at every particular hearing. When you're not treated fairly or when you're arrested or questioned, you need to make sure that you let the judge know, because we're here to protect your rights.
Judges are very biased against fathers. They always give custody to the mothers, no matter what kind of parenting either one of them does.
Well, this is one of many urban myths regarding family law. In fact, just the opposite is true. In 1987, our Washington legislature changed the law on issues of child custody, and in fact, abandoned the phrase child custody altogether in exchange for the term parenting plan. Each case is analyzed differently. Courts look at the merits of each and every family situation. They look at which parent is in the best position to be the primary home for the children. And in part, this is a reflection in the evolution of the nuclear family. Today, we have mothers who work outside the home and fathers who stay at home. And of course, we have many families today in which both parents work outside the home.
When judges don't grant protection orders, it seems like they don't care about the safety of women.
It's not that judges aren't concerned about the safety of women. We are required to follow the statutes that outline the criteria for when we can issue those orders. Those statutes outline not only the conditions that have to be present, which includes the relationships and the type of behavior. And if those things aren't there, and they aren't there sufficiently, then we can't grant the order, even as much as we may want to.
Judges have no rules. They're God in the courtroom. They can do whatever they want.
Well, that isn't so. Judicial discretion, which is what you're referring to, is not the ability to make any decision willy-nilly or whimsically. We are indeed bound. We are bound by the Constitution first and foremost. We are bound by statute. We are bound by legal precedent, that is, cases decided by higher courts. And we are ultimately also bound by rules of ethics and court rules. While it may seem that our decisions are not well thought out or that they are taken out of thin air, judicial discretion is merely the authority granted to us to look at what the legal possibilities are and make a decision within that framework. Many people often ask me on speeding or traffic tickets, for example, to dismiss the case because it's the first time that they've sped or because they're very nice people and excellent drivers. While these are commendable qualities to have, these are not a legal basis upon which I can base a decision. I always try to inform people that while I'm sure they're kind to animals and small children, and I'm sure they vote in every single election, that this is not a basis for me to dismiss a case. I must look at their case the same way I look at everybody else, within the framework of the law. This is fairness, and this is ultimately what justice is about.
Aren't the courts responsible for providing a lawyer for you?
Some people think that they have a right to a lawyer whenever they appear in court, but that's not always true. You do have a right to a lawyer in a criminal matter, but not in most civil matters. You either have to represent yourself or hire your own attorney. Now, there are resources available in the law library or through the County Bar Association with volunteer lawyers or some lawyers who will charge a reduced rate if you qualify for that. But you should know that judges can't give legal advice, and so you may feel frustrated that they're not answering your simple questions, but there's a rule that prohibits them from doing that. Now, you do have a right to have an interpreter if you need one or for assistance if you're disabled, getting in and out of the court and finding parking and other assistance. You should also know that there are some services online, but you should be careful about those. Some are better than others, and some might not be applicable in this state.
Aren't the people at the courthouse supposed to give you legal advice?
Oh no, that's totally untrue. In fact, we are prohibited by state law from providing any legal advice. There's other things that we can do. We have access to court rules that we can give you. We've got pattern forms that you can use that come with instructions as far as like dissolutions and things like that. We have court facilitators that can help you with that paperwork. We use Northwest Justice a lot to help people, but the clerks themselves absolutely cannot give any legal advice.
Judges use bail and fines as a way to increase revenue for the state.
Well, with bail, it is set for the sole purpose of having the defendant come back to court. And so if a defendant comes back to court, the state gets no money. It's only when the defendant fails to show up for his or her court date, otherwise known as skips bail, that the bail could be forfeited, but it's not an automatic thing. There are procedures set in place to ensure that if a bail is to be forfeited, it's for good reason. For example, if a defendant who is coming back to court but gets into a car accident and doesn't show up in court, it's unlikely the court will forfeit that bail because the defendant had a good reason. But if the defendant has no good reason, then yes, that bail will be forfeited. Fines are a form of punishment for committing a crime. And in this state, the legislature sets all punishment. So for example, the most common fine is if you've been committed of a DUI, the legislature has said you must pay X amount. And the court doesn't have any discretion on that. There are other fines that the legislature has given the court the discretion to impose, and the most common would be drug fines. And in my 10 years as a Superior Court judge, I have only imposed that when the parties themselves agreed to an amount, and I've imposed it only if the defendant has an ability to pay.
So do the courts work for the legislative branch?
No, the courts don't work for the legislative branch. Sometimes to legislators it actually feels the other way around. But the truth is that the courts, the legislature, and the executive branch each have their own role to play in the state government. The courts often feel like they're a little hamstrung because they have to follow the laws and implement the laws that we have made here in the legislature, and they can't change those. But on the other hand, the court, when it's carrying out the ultimate will of the voters as expressed through the Constitution, can bind us and tell the legislature what we can and can't do. And sometimes we feel very constrained by that. So we're each other's bosses at different times.
Judges change laws when they rule on them.
Questions about the law are raised when people can't agree on what it says or how it should be applied. And so it's not so much that judges change the law, it's that they interpret the law when there's a question. Judges don't have any dog in the fight. What they're trying to do is to find the meaning that the legislature intended when they passed the law, and then to announce what that meaning is. They have no intention of changing the law when they make that kind of a call. So that's a myth.
One final myth before we end. People often wonder what judges wear under their robes. We wear clothes like everyone else. When judges put on robes, we join in the shared responsibility of defending the Constitution and the rule of law. But when we take off our robes, we're just like you. Thank you very much for allowing us to clarify some common myths and misperceptions about how courts work in Washington State. Hopefully these answers will show you that the courts are a fair place, a place deserving of your trust and confidence.